Thank you, John, for the introduction, and welcome, everybody. Before we start, when I hear this very warm introduction, I always think of those movies that in the preview they look great and then the movie is not so good. So I hope that's not your experience. We are just all the same students and trying to learn what is life about and doing our best and sharing with each other the little experience that we may have with this. There is a saying in Spanish, I'm sure there is a similar one in English. It translates more or less, tell me who your friends are, and I will tell you who you are. And I think that I would paraphrase that to say, tell me what you pay attention to, what you think is important, and I will tell you who you think you are. Because if we look at this culture, at the world right now, and we see where we put our attention, what things we value, who we pay more in the world, for example. You know, money for the world in general is one of the highest goals. Who do we pay more money in the world? Those who entertain us, those who in some way or the other, you know, are heroes in the field of sports or in similar fields. And there are many people doing very valuable things, but we don't value that too much. Maybe we say we value it, but as a culture, we don't really pay much attention to it. And then when we look at our own lives, we may be doing something similar within ourselves. You know, we are a population of different aspects. What aspects of our nature do we pay more attention? What aspects of our nature are more important? We give more time to nourish, to develop. What aspects of our nature we are careful about how we live that aspect. If you see in our regular world, we pay a lot of attention to our physical aspect, to being physical beings, which is perfectly fine. We also pay a lot of attention perhaps to building our careers, to accumulating possessions, to developing relationships, all these kind of aspects of our lives, which are good in themselves. I'm not against any of that. The problem is, are we forgetting some other aspects of our nature that may be as important or more important than this? Because if we look, all of this that I just said is a passing experience. At some point, we depart from here and we leave all this behind. So what is the purpose of our careers, our relationships, our possessions, if they are an end in themselves? Then life is kind of a tragedy, because we run after all these things, put a lot of effort, time, sorrow to accumulate all this, and then we have to leave all this behind. I think this is one of the reasons why death is such a tragedy in our lives, because this is how we are raised to see life, the human being, and the human experience. Now, is there anything that is eternal, that is not going to just pass, something that we retain with us, and therefore is worth paying attention to, is worth working on, because this will stay forever with us? And if there is such a thing, how do we relate to life when we are looking at our human experience from this point of view? Because maybe we begin to discover a different relationship to our health, our jobs, our relationships, our possessions. So tonight I want to explore that aspect of ourselves that, regularly speaking, in our culture is not really emphasized. We can call it spiritual consciousness, or in many other ways. We will see what that means. And we will try to see what the importance of this is in relationship to our daily life. So from a theosophical point of view, we could say that there are three aspects to what a human being is. One is the physical aspect that we all are very familiar with. Through our physicality, we can act, we can accomplish certain kind of goals, we can experience and enjoy certain kinds of experiences. There is a certain field of action that is related with our physicality. Now, there is also a psychological aspect to our nature. That psychological aspect many times supersedes the physical experience. For example, we may be in a place that we are physically not all that comfortable. Maybe the place is too hot or too cold or not with enough comfort. But if we are happy there, if psychologically we are doing something meaningful, that happiness overrides the physical experience. On the contrary, we may be in a perfect place, we may be on vacations, and if psychologically we are not happy or okay, or there is some problem, then all that physical comfort is not really appreciated or enjoyed. So there is the psychological aspect that overrides the physical aspect. Now the question is that all we are? This mind-body complex, these thoughts, emotions, and sensations. Is this all that we are? Because in the way we live, that is what it looks like. We may cultivate our body, we may try to be in situations where they feel emotionally pleasant, we may try to cultivate our minds, and that's it. Now, in the Theosophical view, as I was saying, there is a higher aspect, which in the same way that the psyche overrides the body, this higher aspect can override the experiences on all these other two levels. We can call that the spiritual dimension. When we can have a certain awareness of our spiritual dimension, then even if we are in a situation where psychologically, by psychologically I mean at the level of thoughts and emotions, where we may not be all that comfortable emotionally or mentally, or we may be in a situation where we are not all that comfortably physically, if we are aware of our spiritual nature, all these other things really don't matter much. Just as we said, when we are happy, it doesn't matter if the place is not great. So if we are aware of our spiritual nature, it doesn't matter if the place is not great. It doesn't matter if I cannot have what my emotions desire, because I'm just fine. Being aware of the spiritual aspect makes us being fine, good, with just being. It doesn't depend too much on having, accomplishing. Of course, having, accomplishing, this is also part of the human experience. I'm not against it. But the problem is that when we are limited to that aspect of our nature, we are thrown in a kind of struggle against the environment, against people, against the external world. Because we are all trying to get what we think we need to be happy, and inevitably, many times we get in opposition to another person that is doing exactly the same. But if we can tap into this other dimension of ourselves, then that will put a certain order in our psyche, in our physical existence. And when talking about this, I always remember Krishnamurti, who was a Hindu philosopher, let's say. And he would say, never do anything to be happy. First be happy, and then do anything. And that is very deep, because when we do something to be happy, that something becomes a means for us to get what we are expecting, And therefore, in one way or the other, we establish a relationship of exploitation in a certain sense, philosophically speaking. I'm with a person because that person makes me happy. When that person stops making me happy, then why am I with this person? So there is a song, again in Spanish, and the singer says, I'm not in love with you, I'm in love with myself, with how I feel when I'm with you. Which is, it's quite an insight. So the question is, there is a dimension in ourselves that as we touch it, we begin to be happy or joyful or peaceful or harmonious, however you want to call it, just with the mere experience of being. There is this philosopher, German philosopher Schopenhauer. He used to say, there must be something intrinsically wrong with life, because it seems that life is never enough. If life was good, then we should be happy just with being alive. But we are always running after something more and something more and something more. So obviously, life is not enough. Now that is true when we live a fragmented life, when we live only on these two levels of our being, because there is an essential aspect of ourselves that we are forgetting, that we are not experiencing. So the idea is, let us explore this spiritual consciousness, and we will explore it in relation to the heart, and I will explain why. Of course, there are many aspects of this, but as John said, we will have a retreat this weekend based on a meditation in the heart, which is one of the avenues to stimulate the spiritual consciousness. That's why I'm focusing on this in particular. So what does the heart mean as a symbol? In our culture, normally the heart sometimes has to do with our wishes, our desires. It has to do also with our emotions. Sometimes we talk about speaking from the heart, meaning some kind of expression that is not manipulated by the concepts. Something that comes more from the more genuine, from the core of what we are, and not shaped by our mind and our concepts to present something that we think is acceptable. So there are many, many different aspects normally related to the emotions. Now, in the esoteric view, the heart means something a little deeper than that. The idea is that from our spiritual nature, or when the spiritual nature expresses in ourselves, it expresses with all these virtues that most religions praise, like wisdom, compassion, love, harmony, peace. So the idea is that the heart represents all these higher emotions. And this is like that in many traditions. You can see that the heart is highly praised in Hinduism, for example. In Hinduism, they say the Purusha, the spirit, resides in the heart. In Tibetan Buddhism also, there are techniques of meditation where you visualize the deity, the different deities in the heart. In Christianity, for example, the Hesychasts, which is a group in the Orthodox Christianity, they have the Jesus prayer where they focus their attention in the heart and then they repeat a prayer. With the Sufis, you have also a repetition of the dhikr, that is a technique in Sufism, in the heart again. So most traditions recognize that there is something special with the heart. Why is it? It's just a symbol, just a metaphor. And why the heart? So from the point of view of the Theosophical teachings, our being and everything in the universe is a kind of hologram. Hologram in the sense that each part in some way is representing the whole, is connected with the whole. And also, the whole is expressing in different parts in a special way. So, for example, the idea is that all our organs are connected to some aspects of our consciousness. The brain obviously is connected. We know that the brain is connected to thinking. So the brain is the representative of the mind within the body. You know, if we are not materialists, we may think there are two different things, the mind and the brain. The mind is something non-physical, and it needs a brain to be able to, the activities of the mind, be expressed through our physical body, so you need a brain. In a similar way, from an esoteric point of view, the heart is the physical representative of the spiritual consciousness. Little by little, science is beginning to see that the heart fulfills a role that is far more important than simply being the pump of the body. In ancient traditions, they said that as we focus on the heart, then we can begin to stimulate the spiritual consciousness. So we will see that a little bit later in the talk. But the idea is that in our body, here in the physical body, we have a representative of all the different aspects of consciousness. So, for example, in the writings of Madame Blavatsky, who was one of the founders of the Theosophical Society, she says that the liver is connected to the more personal emotions. So many times if we have a kind of selfish love that is based not on giving but on receiving, we should say, I love you with all my liver. Of course, that doesn't sound very romantic, so I think you wouldn't sell a lot of cards in the supermarket. But the idea is that somehow, focusing on the heart, you can begin to be more aware of the spiritual consciousness. And it makes sense from a certain point of view. We know how if we pay too much attention to our thoughts and we begin to overthink everything, if we begin to be overwhelmed by the thoughts, that can override certain subtler impressions that we don't get from our mind. For example, there may be a situation and we may have the impulse to help out. And then the thought may come and say, wait, do you really have time? Or then you are going to be tired, or you don't have enough, money. And then we may let go of that first impulse of helping out, for example. So you can see that if we pay too much attention to the thinking aspect, we lose sight of some other information that we get that is not only through our head. And that is a problem in our current culture, that we have lost the sensitivity to listen to these other sources of information that are not thoughts. We are right now we praise thinking as the new God. If science says it, then it is right. And if our mind is saying this, then obviously this is how things are. We don't doubt our mind. We don't question our thoughts. But that makes us live in a very little fraction of what we are. Of course, thoughts are important, but they are not the only thing. So if we only give importance to our thoughts, we will live in an unbalanced way. See what happens in the world. We have developed a science that is amazing. We can see what happened in the Big Bang, few nanoseconds after everything started. We can see what happens in the subatomic particles that last less than nanoseconds. And we don't know how to solve very basic issues as everybody have food, shelter, how to distribute the wealth that is there in the world. Because we have paid attention only to the thoughts. And when we pay attention only to one aspect of our being, then we are unbalanced. whether it is only to thoughts, only to emotions, only to the physical. So it is very important that we begin to try to see how to open up our awareness so that all the aspects of our consciousness can be perceived. So a problem that Blavatsky said we have is that in most of us, she would say the brain is too active and the heart is too passive. In most of us, what directs our actions is the brain, and hopefully the brain actually is the liver, if we say that the personal emotions are the liver. Normally, many people just act from reactions. You know, with all this, I was surprised when I read some time ago after the Brexit, when England they voted to leave the European Union. The person that was behind the campaign of the Brexit, he said, the reason why we won, or the other side made a mistake. They gave information, facts. We appealed the emotions of people, and that's why we won. Because we appealed the emotions, people, you know, fear or self-protection or this or that, and then they acted from there. That is a vast part of humanity still is acting primarily from the emotions, and that's perfectly fine. I'm not, saying that they are lesser than anybody else. The only problem is that we know that emotions are not the best guide to tell us what is most wise to do. But then there is another big part of humanity that acts from the mind, and that is also not the best guide. The people who are destroying the world, if we see it, in that more catastrophical way, I think there is a plan behind everything. I don't feel that we are going, into hell. But the people who are now causing problems are the highly intelligent people in the world. The scientists, politicians, the people that are handling the countries, they are highly intelligent, and they are the ones that are producing all the problems. So neither the emotions nor the mind seem to be the best guide for us. So the question is there anything else? In the spiritual traditions, there is this postulate, yes, there is something else. There is the spiritual consciousness. But the spiritual consciousness, although it is there, although that is what we essentially are, is being overpowered by our thoughts and emotions. And this is what Blavatsky meant. The brain is too active, the heart is too passive. What we need to do, she said, is to invert that polarity. Now, the heart has to become more active, and the brain has to become more passive. So what does it mean? At the level of our mind, what this means is that we have to start giving room in our lives for more silence. Not necessarily that we go to a corner and be in silence, or that we just shut our mouths and don't speak with other people, although things may help to start a practice, but more silence in the sense of look at how we go through our day. Are you aware of how constantly we are thinking most of the times about nothing that is really important? See, we get up, and then we may take a shower or brush our teeth, and we are already thinking, and not necessarily something that is important. We prepare our breakfast, our mind is constantly thinking. Maybe we even, put the wrong milk because we are not really paying attention. But we are thinking. And go to work, we are thinking. Between this purposely thinking, there are moments in which we have to pay attention to what we do, and we have a more purposeful thinking to accomplish that. And then as soon as that is over, again, our mind is thinking. So that is what happens to all of us. But in that condition, there is no room to listen to anything deeper. So the first thing we need is to make our mind and our emotions more passive, more quiet. So this is, we can take in our daily life some moments in which we say, I will do this more with an attitude of contemplation, of quiet, of peace, even if it is preparing your breakfast. Say, okay, I will do it, play with this as a meditation. So instead of rushing, stop, take a deep breath, and do it as if you were enjoying it, as if you were, really listening, watching what you do. And then if you have a dog and you take the dog for a walk with the same kind of intention. Little by little, try to incorporate in your life moments in which you just relax, mentally and emotionally, even if you are acting. As we do this, our mind begins to have some more room for deeper insights. Meditation, of course, is also a useful practice if you can take a few minutes every morning, for example, just to be quiet. But at the beginning, it may be difficult to introduce that into your daily routine. You may start by trying to have a more meditative attitude at certain points in your day. And say, if we just say, oh, that's a good idea, I'll do it, and we don't set consciously a time when we do this, probably we will forget. So think and say, when in my day, in my daily routine, I can try this. And think, okay, every time I take the dog out, or every time I do this, or I walk to the store, or whatever you do, I'll try to do this. So this is, for example, a little strategy to begin to make the mind more receptive. And you will be surprised what happens when our mind is more receptive. You will start listening to your body far more. See what happens when we eat with friends and we are not even paying attention. We probably will overeat because we come back to the awareness that we ate too much when we have a stomachache. So because we are not listening to the body. Or when we are doing anything, that's the easiest example. But we don't listen to the body because we are too distracted. I have the tendency to eat too fast. And unless I pay really attention, I just eat fast because I'm not listening to the body. So I have to stop and pay attention. So when our mind is quieter, we start noticing the body, for example. We start also noticing our emotions, our minds. And we say, why am I thinking about this? Why am I feeling that way? When we are just too busy, we get caught up in these patterns. But it is only when we stop having some time to be quiet that we begin to discover, wait a second, why am I going there? I know that going in that direction is not good. It's not useful. So it is only as we start being a little quieter that we begin to discover all this. We cannot solve, our inner complexities if we don't notice them. The problem we have in our culture is that we are not even aware. Why did you do that? Why did you react in that way? We just don't know. We didn't have any choice. There was a situation and the reaction happened before I could even realize it. So the first thing we need to do is to give our minds some time or a moment in the day where they are quieter. Because it is only as the mind becomes quiet that this spiritual consciousness begins to be active. So as we get our minds and our emotions, we give them a little time to be more quiet, then the higher consciousness, which is this understanding, this awareness, and in many moments this may manifest also as peace or harmony or realizing, I'm so worried about that, but after all, it's not all that important. All these realizations come only from the spiritual consciousness. It's not the mind, the personal mind, it's not the personal emotion that can bring this higher perspective. So the first step, as I was saying, is to quiet the mind. The second step is to encourage this insight that begins to come, as the Bible calls it, this still small voice that can be heard only as we begin to be quieter. So we have to encourage it. How do we encourage it? We pay attention to these impressions. There is this feeling, I should help out, the mind trying to say, no, you don't have time, and then you stop and say, okay, let's see. Just don't go by what the mind does, because of course we think we are the mind. But the mind has its own agenda, its own, we were educated to see life in a certain way. And we don't realize that we are seeing life filtered by what our education generated in us, in the family, in the culture. So don't take for granted that if you think it, it must be true. On the contrary, many things we think are not really ours. See how the personality is formed. We are born in a family. We start having a series of experiences. Psychology says during the first 3 years of our lives, our personality is built. How we are going to respond to the world. What are going to be our weaknesses, our strengths, our fears. Now, is it fair that my personality is built before I have any say on it? What can I say when I'm, less than 3 years old? I cannot choose. I want to face this in this way or the other. When I come into consciousness, say when I'm 6, 7, I was already formed by life, by something that was out of my control. So do I want that programming be the one that guides my life? But there is a way out. It's not that we are necessarily caught up in this, but the way out is this spiritual awareness that is unconditioned. If we want the spiritual awareness to be able to guide us, first we have to start questioning the mind. So the mind says, no, you cannot do that. And you say, wait, let me think. Because that is just a reaction. Is that true? When you start questioning, again, you are receptive. Because you are looking, you are watching. We were talking today in a meeting. If you want to listen to something, what is the attitude that you need? Suppose I say, can you hear that bird that is very far away? Here? So what do? You stop, pay intense attention. For the time being, you don't think. You just stop and pay intense attention. That is more or less the attitude that we need when we try to have a perception of the higher consciousness. When you feel that there is something that, there is something that is coming to you, stop the mind and pay attention. Just listen. And you will see this is a way by which we begin to strengthen the spiritual consciousness. If we just perceive something and let our mind, just discard it, then we make it weaker. Because again, as I said at the beginning, what aspect of yourself are you paying attention to? Your attention feeds whatever you are paying attention to. So if you want your spiritual consciousness to be stronger, you must pay attention to it. It is your attention that gives it the vitality to become stronger and stronger. Even if you make mistakes, that is not a problem. Blavatsky says specifically that. We shouldn't worry about making mistakes. If you are trying to follow this deeper perception, follow it. We make mistakes all the time. It's not that by following our minds we don't make mistakes. We make mistakes all the time. That is the human stage is a stage of learning. So make a mistake trying to follow this deeper perception. And you will see how little by little this perception begins to be more powerful, and the more powerful it is, the clearer it is. So you will be less likely to misinterpret, to mishear it. When you start paying attention to this, then you start feeding it, and then it becomes a more important value in your life. So these are the two main aspects. do things to have more time to quiet your mind and emotions in your daily life, and pay more attention to this. At the beginning, we don't even hear this little voice. But when you are quieter, you start hearing it. And there is this voice that says, I shouldn't do this, for example. I should change the direction in my actions in this. And then the mind says, oh no, because maybe you don't want to take the trouble, because you may think that you are not able to. Even if you fail, failure is not a problem. What we need is to try. So you say, okay, I realize I have to change this in my life, and say, I will try it. You fail? Well, if you don't try, you will fail anyway. But when you fail trying, you are strengthening that aspect of yourself that in the next instance may be strong enough to guide you in the right direction. So we are goal-oriented, and we think that unless we succeed, then it was useless. In the spiritual world, that has nothing to do with reality. In the spiritual world, what we want to do is what will produce results. Maybe not today, because we are carrying the past. We are already conditioned. My conditioning may be too strong for my awakening spiritual consciousness. So for somebody that knows, that person may say, well, you obviously are not going to succeed right now because your conditioning is too strong. But how do you overcome that? By trying and failing. Because that trying is feeding this other factor. If you don't try, you will be stuck there. So it's not a question of succeeding. It's a question of what are you trying in your life? What are you paying attention to? Pay attention, try it, and forget about what happens. Just pay attention to the trying to do the best you can. So these are the two things. Quiet the mind and pay more attention to this inner voice. And then the other aspect that we are going to explore more practically on Saturday is how meditation in the heart may help in this particular process. So as I said, many traditions have some kind of spiritual practice based on the heart. Now in the Theosophical tradition, there is this piece of advice, I guess, that when you do a meditation focusing on the heart, what we mean by the heart is not really the physical organ. It's like a spiritual center that is in the area of the heart. You see, when you are happy, suppose when you are happy, if you pay attention, where do you feel the happiness? You will see that there is like an energy here. You feel that there is you will see that there is a sense of being full here. If you are afraid, where do you feel your fear? Many times it's in the stomach, because the stomach is connected with the emotional aspect, especially the weaker aspect of the emotions. Liver is more connected either to with the more active desire or anger. The stomach is, let's say, with the masculine aspect of emotion, masculine philosophically speaking, the one that is more active. The stomach is more related to the feminine aspect, that is the more receptive, the sensitivity. So you can fear the fear here. You can feel the fear here. When you feel happy, when you feel peace, you can see that the energy is here. That is because something is happening there. This is why these spiritual traditions are saying focus on this region, because the way that this spiritual consciousness manifests in the body is on this spiritual center that is in the heart area. And from there, the information can be sent to the brain if the brain is receptive. We have, as I said, some scientists that are beginning to explore the relationship between the heart and the brain. So the idea is that when we practice focusing in the area of the heart and we meditate with our consciousness there, we begin to be more able to perceive in our daily life the promptings from the higher consciousness. You know, for example, if you start studying something or doing something, if you start painting, at the beginning you see some colors and you may see 2 or 3 colors there. But as you pay more and more attention and you are trained in that, you may be able to distinguish a lot of different shades that an eye that is not trained cannot distinguish. What is the difference? Now you are paying close attention and you start knowing the field, you start appreciating the differences, the subtleties. So same with our spiritual consciousness. Nothing in life trains us to pay attention to the spiritual consciousness. So we have to do it. Our education, our jobs, they don't train us to pay attention to this. So it is our responsibility to do it. When we do the meditation in the heart, what we are doing is we start paying attention to these kind of sensations that go unnoticed for the most part. So there are different techniques to do that. Now, the basic idea is you can first start trying to meditate and pay attention to the sensations in the region of the chest. And at the beginning you will say there is nothing there. It's always, if we suddenly turn the lights off, you will see only darkness. But after a while, you will start seeing some shapes. You know, your eyes get used to the darkness and then are able to see something. When we go inside, we always see darkness. And you say, there is nothing there. There is only void. There is a sense of emptiness. I don't want to go there. But if you stay, you will see how little by little you start distinguishing a lot of things in silence. This is why the mystics in all traditions, they always tell you, go in the direction of the silence. Go in the direction of the darkness. You know, there is this Christian mystic, very early Christian mystic, Dionysius, or the scholars now say his name was different, Pseudo-Dionysius they call him. He used to talk about the divine darkness. He said the divine is always in darkness. Not the darkness of the evil that we normally think of. It's the darkness that is the primordial darkness, where everything is like a unity, where there are no differences. So when you turn inward, go always in the direction of the silence, in the direction of what seems silent or dark, and dwell there. Dwelling in silence, for devotional people, you can think of dwelling in silence as kneeling in front of the deity, because the deity dwells in silence. When you go inside, even Jesus said in the Gospels, go to your room, close the door, and be there in silence. So when we dwell in silence, we are that very dwelling in silence, we are adoring the spiritual, in whatever conception you have of it. Because I mention this because many people have this experience and then they say, this is a waste of time. I sit, there is nothing there, I'm just wasting my time. That is what the mind says. And for the mind, obviously, it's just wasting time. Because the life of the mind is in creating thoughts and memories and doing things. So of course, for the mind, this is a waste of time. Now remember that the principle we are talking about is making the mind less active. So that is precisely what we need. We need the mind, and by mind I also include the personal emotions, as opposed to the spiritual emotions. The spiritual emotions, compassion, love, all that shines through far brighter if the mind and the personal emotions, fear, ambition, need to possess, if they are quiet, then the true emotions, the spiritual emotions, can shine through. So what we need is to make this aspect quieter. So yes, go there, go to the silence and just dwell there and see what happens. So you will start, in the meditation, you go to your heart and just dwell in silence, paying attention to the sensations there. This is a very basic approach. There are several things that you can do with visualizations and all that we don't have time to go through today. But essentially, you can start doing that and start paying attention. And then you will see that as a consequence of this, of giving your mind time to be quiet, paying more attention to the promptings of the spiritual nature, you will see how they begin to have more impact in your life. Now, this, we have to understand that this is a very serious enterprise. What we are trying to do here is to discover the truth of what we are. And therefore, no serious enterprise is easy in the sense of just a paved way. When we start looking, we may see things that we don't like, that before we were unaware of. We may have to face, like Jung would say, we have to face our shadow. If we don't face the shadow is our master. It's just what I said before. When we are not aware of something, we are not free. We don't have an option. If I'm not aware of certain reactions, I just react without anybody asking me, do you want to do this or that? I just do it. So it is not pleasant, especially at the beginning. Later on, everything changes. But it is not pleasant to face those things that, because we don't like them, we keep them back there. But unless we do, we are going to be the slave of this aspect. So the problem, I think one problem with spirituality is that we don't understand the intermediate state. The destination is a state of more joy, more harmony, more peace. But the path to get there, first we have to face our misconceptions, the errors, let's say, that we normally, naturally absorb in our living. So first we have to face what is that is not in harmony, and then when that is set in order, we will discover that our true nature is harmony. But if you come to the spiritual work thinking that it has to provide an immediate sense of peace and happiness and all this, and you are not willing to go through the process, then you will never get there. Because the process implies being able to face these aspects of ourselves. But they are not a big deal. Once we start doing it, you discover that it's not a big deal. I remember when I was a teenager, I did some karate, and the first thing that the senpai, the teacher there, did was to tie our belts, and with gloves, we had to hit each other. And of course you couldn't retreat because you were tied. So you got punched, quite a bit. And he said, once you face that, and you are punched, and you see that it's not a big deal, then you are not afraid any longer. You can be there with all your senses because you are not afraid. You are used to this. You say, oh, it wasn't that big of a deal. So you are present. Same with working with ourselves. In our culture, we are always running away from whatever seems to be unpleasant because we don't know how to deal with it. We don't have the confidence that we will be able to, because we think that life should be only pleasant sensations or experiences. But because we run away, we are weak. We don't know how to deal with these things. The more we run away, the weaker we are. So when we start facing it, at the beginning it may be a little, challenging, but then you get used to it and you say, it's just sensations, it's just emotions, it's not a big deal. But that only happens with experience. To get you through that period, many times a group is very important. It's a very important support. Other people that are trying to do the same. A few people may be a little more experienced in some aspect or the other. And the support of the group in this very challenging inner work is important many times. This is why in the Theosophical Society we are not just a lecture stage, But we have study groups and discussion groups where we try to work together, either physically or online. So a group is many times important, but it's not essential. Some people can do it by themselves, and that's fine. Maybe once you get some experience, it's nice if you can offer that to others and be of service to others. But anyway, so the point is that as you start giving more space in your mind to listen to what is going on, you may face these stages. Don't be afraid, don't worry, we are all the same, we all go exactly through the same, and you can move forward from there. Just by, when you face it, just, think of it as a little kid, a boy or a girl that is having a fit, and you just love the boy or the girl, and you just embrace it until the fit is over. So when you see something inside of you, you don't need to be harsh, you don't need to be violent with yourself. Just embrace it in awareness, and you will see how the fit is over. If you pay attention to it without fighting it, just embrace it, you will see that in a few minutes, the fit is over. And just like a little kid will be happy again, running around. So as we go through all this, don't be afraid, embrace it, trust the process, and you will see that in relatively short time, 20 years, no. But, in all this gradually takes several years, but we grow gradually with this. It's not that you enjoy the results only at the end of the process. Every little step, you are a little, better, a little freer from this reaction. So you will see that after some time, you get comfortable, you know how to deal with this, and it stops being a problem. So basically, those are the principles that I wanted to share with you. Try to see in your life when you can have time to be quiet. If you live in a place where nature is close, see if you can spend at least every week some time enjoying nature, being quiet. Start paying attention to these promptings that don't come from the mind, that normally come more like a feeling, like an intuition. I should do this, I shouldn't do that. Pay attention to them, don't be afraid. Say, I will try it. I don't promise anything. I don't promise success. I'll promise that I will try. And if I fail, if I'm not strong enough, that's perfectly fine, because this is what will make me strong. So listen to it and pay attention to it. And then if you can start with meditation, focusing on the heart area, then that also will make you more sensitive to all these promptings.
So this is basically the path of the heart.
Mm-hmm.
How does service fit into this path?
Mm-hmm. Yes. One thing that happens like naturally when we start paying attention to this deeper aspect is that we find joy in sharing. Just as I said, there is always this little voice that says, let me see if I can help out. And the one that says, no, you can't, is the mind. The heart is always willing to, has the tendency to expand, to share, to give away, the movement of the heart is a movement of expansion. The movement of the mind is normally a movement of contraction, of saying, this is what I am, I'm separate from there, and everything is perceived in relation to this particular center. So as we start paying more attention to the heart, naturally, we become more serviceable, let's say, people, because we start being more aware of this. So whenever there is a need, service is not only giving money online to some company or organization that we think is doing something good. That is also part of service, and it's perfectly fine. But service is more the attitude in which we are looking at the bigger picture and not self-centered in ourselves. Many times we could be doing something else that the body or the mind may enjoy. But if you do something that is better for the greater good, you will see that there is a feeling of accomplishment in your heart, in the region of the chest. So paying more attention to the heart naturally makes you want to share. Maybe with your family, because you don't have more time than that. Maybe with an organization. Many people retire and they are depressed because they feel useless. They don't know what to do with their times. They watch more TV or eat more this. Or why don't we volunteer? All organizations like the TS and many others, we live based on the volunteer work from people who retire and now they have time to help. There is so much to do in the world. So if we, and that you will see that it begins to make you more aware of the heart, of what comes from the heart. So I think that service is a very important aspect which comes spontaneously, but you can make it also consciously as part of the practice. Okay, I'll start helping because maybe you don't feel it at the beginning, but when you start doing it, then that helps you be more and more in touch with the heart. So that is an important practice in the Theosophical tradition. We always say there are three main aspects that we need to work on: the study of serious literature to help our understanding, meditation, and service. So service is an important part.
Is there a relationship between a moral life, whatever moral might be, and the responsiveness of the heart?
Yeah, I fully believe that, because in the West we tend to think of morality as certain, maybe even, artificial rules that we have to follow to please a deity. Now, if we examine what morality is, of course, every culture may develop certain level of artificial morality. But if you see the core of the universal morality that you can see in many religions, the things that are shared in many religions, these are a universal morality that doesn't have to do with the particular social, cultural environment in which the religion was created or developed. This morality, if you see, is trying to do exactly what I was saying. It's trying to give less room to the personal nature, to the personal feelings, to jealousy and possessiveness and all these things, and giving more room to the spiritual consciousness. So morality is designed to produce exactly this. The problem is that we take morality as an external rule. Don't do this, and we think that all we have to do is to refrain ourselves from physically doing something. This is something far deeper. What we need to do is to work on these different aspects, because as we understand why we do this, and we face it, we try to understand it, and we gently try to move away from that particular action, it's like anything. We fall into habits, and the same way that we cannot cut habits, physical habits all of a sudden, and we need some time. In a similar way, we cannot cut all of a sudden certain emotional or mental habits. But the basis of morality is to do this, to reduce the personal nature, and to say people pay more attention to the higher nature and follow that higher nature. So I think if you see, I always say in the West, we create a technology of spirituality. We take Buddhism and extract only the meditation part, and we don't pay attention to anything else that is traditional in Buddhism, or Hinduism the same, or whatever it is. Morality is always a strong part in all these traditions, and the study and understanding and all this is all there, but we are interested in techniques, and we extract them, and that doesn't really work. The results are kind of superficial. So yes, morality is very important.
Welcome back, Pablo. You were talking about the turning off your mind, and sometimes that's hard for people to do. But it seems like what you're saying is that if you don't, you're sort of reacting with all those beliefs that you learned in the first 3 years that most likely might not even benefit you anymore. But if you learn to respond with your true nature, that's what's going to be good for you.
Mm-hmm. And we have to be patient. You know, we want, especially in spirituality, we want fast results because we don't really understand how it works. You know, if you want to learn anything, I always bring the example playing the piano, maybe because I don't know how to play the piano. You don't expect you to try 2 weeks and then be a master at that. You know that it will take time. You know that your first practice will not really be doing music. You will follow the scales and you will do something that has nothing to do, apparently, with performing music. But you need to do that. You understand. You go through it. Same with spirituality. It's something that gradually we grow into. So sometimes the practices are not, you say, I'm not living more spiritual. I'm not understanding better. Don't judge in that way, because it's just the learning how to go in life, trying to look at it from a different perspective. So yes, it's true. It's not easy to quiet the mind. Even in the Bhagavad Gita, which is a Hindu scripture, there is this teacher, Krishna, teaching Arjuna, and Krishna is teaching him all this, be quiet. And Arjuna says, trying to make the mind quiet is like trying to grasp the wind with your fist. You know, it's impossible. And Krishna says it's difficult, it's not impossible. And like anything else that is difficult, you only have to be patient, and in time, you can do it. It's not impossible. So yes, we have to be patient, and you will see. It's always the beginning is always the most difficult aspect, because you don't have the little results that begin to appear that can encourage you. So at the beginning, it's always a little dry. Any practice is a little dry at the beginning. This is when a group can help you, if you can participate in a group. And then as you start seeing little results, that in itself gives you the enthusiasm. So we have to be patient and trust that this works.
When you tune into that deeper voice, it seems as if there is that intuitive sense that one can experience. And I'm wondering about the writing of that. In other words, if someone feels moved to whatever, if you write that out, is that a valuable thing to do, or in fact, does it dilute it? Perhaps it is that you shouldn't do that at all, but the very movement of what you feel intuited to do has more power than diluting it by writing it and looking at it.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I think there are two movements in what we could call inspiration. And if we understand the two of them, then maybe we can go about this in the best possible way. Many times when there is a certain sense of inspiration, something is being formed, and because we are so identified with action, we want to enact it immediately, maybe by writing it, or there is some intuition forming, and the mind comes in and tries to shape it, and in that shaping it, because the mind didn't finish listening to the whole thing, it may distort it and produce an idea that is not what was coming through. So the first step, I think, or the first stage, is to be quiet and let the whole thing come through, which many times is a feeling, it's not words. In some people it may appear as words, but be quiet and let that, like you absorb the feeling without trying to make it into a form, into words, into actions, into a plan. So just absorb it. when the moment is gone, I think many times it's useful to now try to shape it. You can shape it, by words. If you want to write, you can paint, or you can just make a decision how you are going to live according to this. The shaping it afterwards, it is useful. Maybe as you go on, it gets less useful, because this formless perception has its own strength, so that you don't need to give it an artificial form, and just the perception will stay with you. But at the beginning, when all this is kind of blurry and confused, I think giving it a form is useful. We have to know that as we give it a form, there will be some elements that were not there. This is why many mystics, a Christian mystic, when writing about this, will interpret it as God and Jesus and Mary, and a Hindu mystic will say Krishna and this. So when we give it a form, then the mind will introduce its own conditionings. But to me, it's something that you can bear with if this makes it more concrete in your eyes. So, but I would say, don't let the mind interfere too soon. Wait, absorb the feeling, stay in silent afterwards, and then, yes, try to give it a shape. And then as time passes, you will see that the need to give it a shape may cease, or if it stays there, it's just trying to express the beauty of it, and not, trying to make it concrete.
How can vibrational resonance be utilized to maybe aid with getting into this heart field kind of meditation? I understand, yes, being silent from within is a large component, but how about vibrational surrounding from without to help maybe resonate with a certain frequency that will get you there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, helps are always good, especially at the beginning. What I think we notice is that at the beginning we may need certain helps, and at some point that which helped becomes a hindrance. Even when a baby is trying to learn how to walk, a walker is important, but then at some point he has to let go of it and try by himself. So if music, if a mantra, if any technique, vibrational technique, helps you come to the right emotional and mental stage, then fine, do it, But at some point you may realize that when you are able to come to this state by yourself, then because the help is transcended, it may be like a kind of external noise, and you may at some point feel that you don't need it any longer. I always say in spirituality, be very experimental. Don't believe what people say, in the sense that what is important is not what you do, but the effect of what you are doing. So see if this helps you. If this helps you, use it until you discover it doesn't help you any longer. And then drop it, no problem, and see what's the next, your next step. So, but yeah, many times it's, even with the practice of meditation, sometimes people say, should I listen to music or not before? Well, if that helps you calm down and enter into a harmonious state, use it. And at some point you will realize, I'm already in silence, I just want to enjoy pure silence. So then is when the music is not necessary any longer.
You said something earlier about when you first start being still and doing the meditation. I can't remember exactly how you said it, but you said at first it's very difficult, and then after a while it gets easier. And I'm wondering, is the reason for that because the negative feelings, the bad behavior, the gossip and dishonesty and all those things eventually become less? Or is it because we start becoming aware of those things and accept them as something that can help our spiritual growth?
I think a little of both. Well, first, everything that is new generates a certain reaction, even with new food or a new culture or a new something, because we are not used to it. There is something in our constitution that is very instinctive and wants the known. Things be however they were, you know. So there is a natural, instinctive reaction to what is less known. So when we start seeing this aspect of ourselves, it's not even a rational reaction, it's an instinctive reaction to run away from it. But then, like anything else, once we get used to it, that instinctive reaction stops, and then it becomes easier. Now, that is one aspect. Then, as we embrace all this, it begins to be less conflictive. It's like, you know, if you have somebody that needs to say something, and if you don't listen to that person, all that builds up inside. If you listen to the person, the fact of the person feeling that you are open, that you are listening, that the person feels that he or she can express himself, diminishes the tension. The same happens with our own psyche. When there is an aspect that you don't listen to, that aspect is is stronger. It tries to come into your awareness, and then we have to fight it. When you open the door and you accept it and you say, okay, I listen to you, I hear you, and you embrace it, then that very fact makes it less conflictive. You are cutting this duality that we are generating. So it's not that it will disappear all of a sudden, but somehow now it's integrated. This is what psychology has discovered. Now, in the spirituality, I think goes a little beyond. You can actually solve the problem, not only accept it, integrate it so that it doesn't bother you too much. You can solve the problem, but that problem is solved like indirectly as what I said at the beginning, as you start being more and more aware of the spiritual, that spiritual awareness naturally sets in order the lower levels, the psychological and the physical. You know, if you are in a place that you are very happy and it's not very comfortable, you don't experience it as uncomfortable, not because you changed the physical, but because you are focused on something else, and then the physical is fine. So same with the spiritual nature. When you are more aware of the spiritual nature, then the psyche just by itself falls into place. It's not so conflictive. So I think both things happen.
So if I am thinking, and these thoughts, one after another, chaining through my mind, follow one another, who's doing the thinking or the willing that says, you need to stop thinking the thoughts?
Mm-hmm. If it is a thought, I need to stop thinking it is the mind. But there are two things there. There is this sense, this recognition for the need for silence. That feeling, that recognition is the higher consciousness being present there. Now, the higher consciousness may induce your mind to think, I have to stop. This difference is subtle, but it's important because at some point, you have to let go of the mind altogether, the part that is trying to talk and the part that is trying to stop the talking. What we are is this unuttered, unspoken feeling. And if we can identify more and more ourselves with just that unspoken feeling, the mind comes into quiet by itself. So, it's not good to enter into a fight with our own mind, because then we are fighting the mind from the level of the mind, and all you do is to fight. So when the mind is chattering, there is this recognition, the need for silence, and you just relax and position yourself somehow in this recognition for the need of silence without fighting the mind, and you will see that the thoughts slow down. Now, of course, the thoughts have their habit to be there, so that won't happen all of a sudden. but just the focus on the recognition to be silent, on that aspect of yourself that wants to be silent, and just dwell there and let the mind alone. And you'll see how the mind comes to a state of quiet by itself.
All right, so going back to the mind, there are different layers of the mind. Would there be value in maybe harmonizing with, let's call it the higher mind, as a part of the meditation versus, the lower mind, kind of like you might have a root chakra versus a much higher chakra that maybe is focused on different things that aren't as tangible?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is the idea. Now, we have to make sure what we mean by higher mind and lower mind, because many times we call something higher that is just part of the lower mind. So, the higher mind is not interested in, is not ambitious, is not violent, is not, if when we really understand what the higher mind is, then we can position ourselves in that state of consciousness. Because many times it's the lower mind trying to attain a goal that says to another part of the mind, I'm the higher, and you have to do this. And it's trying to force the lower mind. And it's all a play within the lower mind. We need to learn to recognize what are the qualities of the higher mind, and those are the qualities that will affect our lower mind. So some qualities of the higher mind is this sense of integration, awareness, this sense of what is important is the moment and not the goal that I'm trying to attain, this sense of no judgment, no fear. All these judgment, fear, goals are in the lower mind. So yes, if we understand what the higher mind is, that is exactly what we want to do.
What we call the higher mind is what we're talking about is the heart.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all we're talking about.
Yeah. Technically, in Theosophy, for those who know the Theosophical tradition, it's what we call buddhi manas. Buddhi is this source of enlightenment or clarity, and manas is the mind when working from that point of view, from the point of view of clarity. So that is the heart, buddhi manas in a Theosophical tradition.